March 1st, 1954, the Pacific Ocean, somewhere east of the Marshall Islands. A wooden fishing boat drifts in the pre-dawn dark. 23 crew members, fishermen from the port of Yaizu, Japan, are sleeping, playing cards, hauling lines. Just another night at sea. Their boat, the Lucky Dragon No. 5, was 85 miles east of a small coral atoll called Bikini. They were outside the declared danger zone. They had every reason to believe they were safe. At 6:45 in the morning, the United States detonated a hydrogen bomb. It was supposed to yield 6 megatons. It yielded 15. In 1 second, a fireball 7 kilometers across lit up the Pacific. The mushroom cloud reached 40 kilometers in under 10 minutes. This single explosion was 1,000 times more powerful than the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima. On the Lucky Dragon, the fishermen saw the sky turn white. Hours later, a fine white ash began falling from the sky. They thought it was snow.
Operation Castle, the fifth in a series of tests at the Pacific Proving Grounds.
The detonation of Castle Bravo was the result of the atomic race. In August 1953, the Soviet Union successfully tested its first hydrogen bomb, called Joe 4. The Americans had tested theirs first 1 year earlier, but the Soviets were catching up fast. In Washington, the pressure was enormous. The military needed a bomb small enough to be dropped from an aircraft, light enough to be deployed, powerful enough to matter. The answer was a device called Shrimp, a compact thermonuclear weapon, fueled by a solid compound called lithium deuteride. On paper, it would yield 6 megatons. The scientists at Los Alamos had run the numbers. They were confident. There was just one problem. Lithium has 2 isotopes, lithium-6 and lithium-7. The designers assumed lithium-7 would be inert during explosion. They were wrong. On the morning of March 1st, 1954, the crew of the observation post on Bikini prepared for the test. Weather conditions were acceptable. Wind direction noted, logged, and then set aside. The schedule would not be changed. At 6:45 a.m., they detonated Shrimp.
1 March 1954. 70 miles from the first shot of Operation Castle. A device with 1,000 times the energy of the bomb that shattered Hiroshima, exceeding the power of that bomb as vastly as it exceeded the greatest high-explosive giants of World War II. Multi-megaton weapons are here.
Within 1 second of detonation, the sky was consumed by a fireball 7 kilometers in diameter. The blast was 2.5 times larger than any prediction. Instead of 6 megatons, the power was 15 megatons. The mushroom cloud rose to 40 kilometers in under 10 minutes. It spread to a diameter of 100 kilometers. Every instrument on the observation post went off the charts. Scientists watching from a bunker 30 miles away later described the experience as unlike anything they had anticipated. The light was blinding even through protective goggles. The ground shook, and then the heat wave arrived. Even at that distance, it felt like standing next to an open furnace. One physicist wrote in his notes simply, "Oh God." When the smoke cleared, Bikini Atoll had a new feature, a crater 2 kilometers wide and 76 meters deep. Coral, water and sand had been vaporized and thrown into the stratosphere. What went up as an atoll came down as radioactive dust, and the wind was carrying it east.
It is now known that fallout from the larger Castle shots blanketed areas of more than 5,000 square miles with radioactive material that would have been lethal to unprotected personnel.
On the Lucky Dragon boat, the men noticed the sky had changed color. Then, Around 7 in the morning, it began to snow. Except it was March. In the tropics, the white powder settled on the deck, on their skin, in their hair. Some of the men touched it. One tasted it. It had a faint, slightly chalky flavor. They had no idea they were covered in vaporized corals saturated with radioactive fallout. 80 miles north, on the island of Rongelap, 64 inhabitants went about their morning routines, as the same white powder fell from the sky. Children played in it. Women used it to wash their hands. In total, 239 Marshallese people on the atolls of Rongelap, Eilinginai, and Utirik were exposed to acute radiation in the hours after the blast. None of them had been warned. By evening, the crew of the Lucky Dragon were sick, nausea, headaches, skin burning where the powder had touched them, eyes itching and swelling shut. The ship's doctor had no diagnosis. No one did. The words radiation sickness wouldn't appear in the ship's log for many days. They turned the boat around and headed home to Yaizu. On March 14, 1954, 2 weeks after the test, the Lucky Dragon docked in Yaizu. All 23 crew members were visibly ill, hair falling out, skin peeling. Radiation levels on the boat were so high that Geiger counters went off scale. Japanese newspapers ran the story immediately. The country that had survived Hiroshima and Nagasaki now had its third nuclear incident within a decade. The response from Washington was swift and remarkable. The Atomic Energy Commission suggested the Lucky Dragon may have been a Soviet spy vessel. The radiation readings, they said, were possibly exaggerated. The fish caught by the crew safe to eat. At the same time, in a quiet regulatory memo, the US government tightened import restrictions on Japanese fish. The contradiction was impossible to hide. On September 23, 1954, 6 months after the test, Aikichi Kuboyama died. He was the radio operator of the Lucky Dragon. He was 40 years old. His final words, spoken to his wife, were a wish that he be the last victim of the atomic bomb. He was the first person to die as a direct result of the hydrogen bomb. He would not be the last. 7 months after Castle Bravo explosion, a Japanese film studio released a movie about a prehistoric sea creature awakened and mutated by nuclear testing. Godzilla became a global phenomenon, but in Japan, audiences understood exactly what it was about. It wasn't a movie about monster. Across Japan, scientists, artists, and ordinary citizens began organizing. By 1955, over 32 million Japanese had signed a petition calling for a ban on hydrogen bomb testing. A single fisherman's death had started a movement that would reshape international politics. Scientists who had helped build the atomic bomb began publicly opposing it. On August 5, 1963, 9 years after Castle Bravo, the United States, Soviet Union, and the United Kingdom signed the Partial Test Ban Treaty. Atmospheric nuclear testing was over. The treaty was imperfect. Underground testing continued for decades, but at least the sky was no longer a test range. Castle Bravo had made that possible, not through any political calculation, but through the slow, undeniable accumulation of evidence, outrage, and grief. Bikini Atoll was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2010, recognized not for its beauty, but as a monument to nuclear testing and its consequences. It remains contaminated. Its original inhabitants have never fully returned home. Their compensation claims, totaling nearly $2 billion, have never been fully paid by the United States Congress. The last frame of this story has not yet been written.